Hey everybody, it's Shaman Sister Sin, and thank you for joining us here on the littleshaman.com. You are listening to the Meditations and More podcast brought to you by Transrelational Healing, shamanspiritcenter.com, and littleshaman.org. That's me, the Little Shaman. Today I wanted to talk to you about something that virtually everyone deals with when dealing with narcissists, and that is that narcissists twist things. This is unfortunately extremely common, so I thought we could talk about it on the show today. In communication, certain things have to happen. At the very, very least, we have to speak the same language as the person we're trying to communicate with, and we have to have an agreed upon reality that we are both communicating about. If we don't have at least these things, there can be no understanding, which means that there cannot be any actual communication between us. Communication is predicated on understanding. For example, I am talking to you now in a language that we all understand, using words that we all know and can process about an agreed upon subject that I outlined in the beginning of this episode and that you agreed to engage with when you clicked on the episode to listen to it. We can communicate. I can talk and you can listen and you can understand. If you would like to respond, you can, and I can understand you. If we run into confusion, we can ask clarifying questions and engage in further communication until we understand each other. That's communicating, and it's largely made possible by the existence of those two things that we first mentioned. We are speaking the same language, and we are communicating about an agreed upon reality. We're doing that because we are attempting to arrive at understanding of some kind. The goal of healthy communication is understanding. You are listening to this to gain understanding, and I am offering it for the same reason, to facilitate and foster understanding. You want to understand, I want to be understood. I want to understand, and you want to be understood. We both have the same goal. Any misunderstandings that might occur can therefore be resolved or worked through because we're both working toward the same goal. However, when you are dealing with pathologically narcissistic personalities, you do not have the same goal. You are not speaking the same language, and you do not have an agreed upon reality. Because of this, misunderstandings run rampant in interactions with narcissists, and they usually cannot be resolved. The narcissist will not allow it. This is often confusing for people because why wouldn't someone want a misunderstanding to be resolved? Furthermore, why is this person seemingly incapable of understanding that there even has been one? Why are they attacking me, calling me a liar, refusing to speak to me, or whatever other thing they're doing instead of just accepting my explanation of what I really meant? Why is this going like this? Why can't I stop it from happening? What is the problem? The problem is that narcissists operate from a place of extreme defensiveness. It's so extreme that it makes them incapable of critically evaluating information. On top of that, they don't trust themselves to do this anyway. They seem to have decided that if they can't find an absolutely foolproof way to be able to tell whether something is true or a lie, or whether something is dangerous or not, they will simply assume that everything is harmful and everything is a lie, no matter who is saying it or what else is going on. This way, they're never vulnerable to attack. They cannot be tricked or manipulated or made a fool of. They cannot be hurt. They think this protects them. It does not. What it actually does is make exactly what they were afraid of into reality. I'm afraid that you will lie to me, hurt me, or trick me somehow, and I cannot tolerate the shame attached to that, so I have decided that you actually are trying to do that all the time. This way, I can't be caught off guard. I am no better off than I was before, and I actually feel worse than I would if I looked at things logically and in context, but at least it didn't catch me off guard. It couldn't because I didn't give it a chance to surprise me. I expected it all the time, and that way I was ready for it. It surprises the other person, though, and of course it does. Most people do not deal with this level of distrust and irrationality on a regular basis. Many have never encountered it at all before they met this person. Even people who have dealt with very abusive human beings in the past are often not prepared for the experience of dealing with the pathologically narcissistic personality. It's like a cartoon, a caricature. How can a real human being behave this way, say these things, think these things? How can a person over the age of like 4 years old believe in such black and white characterizations of life and of other human beings? But narcissists do, and everything that happens is twisted to fit into this very narrow understanding. Ironically, this is one of the ways we can tell that so much of this is sincere. People often ask, how do they do that so fast? How do narcissists twist things so quickly? How can they think that fast? The answer is they don't. They are actually interpreting it that way. There's no need to reflect and calculate and come up with scenarios or ways to fit things together much of the time. They are reporting their experience in real time. In this situation, even calling it twisting is probably overstating what's actually happening. To say that they're twisting the narrative or the events in this particular context implies that this is something being done consciously. And in these specific situations, it's not. For narcissists, there are only two ways that a thing can be. And since they don't really believe in the goodness of other people, there's really only one. It's black or it's white. And for narcissists, it's almost always black. Again, they think assuming this protects them from being hurt and trying to convince them that this is not necessary is like trying to convince somebody that breathing is not necessary. It's a survival mechanism, and as far as they can see, it has worked very well for them. It has not, of course, but they only remember the times that this mindset appears to have been validated and therefore reinforced and protected them, even if they had to twist things in order for that to be true. They don't seem to realize that if you always expect something bad to happen, just based on the law of averages, you will eventually be right at some point. Even a stopped clock is right twice a day. Even a blind pig comes up with an acorn every once in a while. They also don't seem to realize that if you're looking for something, you will find it, even if you have to make it up to see it. This is true of people, not just narcissists. Studies done on this phenomenon have shown that people who were asked to find all the blue dots in an exercise began finding them even when there actually weren't any. They expected there to be blue dots, so when there no longer were any blue dots, they saw dots as blue that were not blue. Or think about when you get a new red car and you start seeing red cars everywhere for a while. There aren't any more or less red cars than there were before you bought yours. You're just actively looking for them now. If you were also afraid of red cars or you thought they were dangerous, you very likely might identify some cars as red that others would not consider red. Why? Because you're hyper-focused on that and you have to make sure that you didn't miss any, because if you do, you could be harmed. Expectation has a massive impact on perception. In many ways, we see what we expect to see. Our brains tend to look for and remember details and information that confirms our expectations. This is how cognitive biases are created, for example. When dealing with someone who is so disconnected from reality anyway, the impact of expectation on their perception is beyond massive. It may, in fact, be the single biggest factor of influence here. They expect you to be evil or stupid or cruel or whatever other negative thing, so they perceive that you actually are these things. They expect to be attacked, so they perceive that they actually are being attacked. This creates a negative feedback loop that just keeps reinforcing itself and becomes entrenched into the person's worldview. Each time their expectations are confirmed, whether through misinterpretation or through reality, it reinforces their belief system, leading to a cycle of more distrust and more hostility that can be extremely difficult to break. Fear also impacts perception enormously, and as you can probably guess, in much the same ways. Fear is a very powerful motivator, and it tends to color our perceptions more than other feelings because it's so strong and we react to it so intensely. If people are also afraid of something they are expecting, this can make their perceptions and their reactions much stronger and much more distorted. Not only might they see it anyway, whether it's there or not, but it can become what is called a self-fulfilling prophecy. This is where a person behaves in such a way that creates the situation they're afraid of. such as expecting and being so afraid that a partner will leave them that they constantly accuse the partner of cheating or otherwise betraying and abandoning them when they haven't. So the partner exits the relationship because they're tired of not being trusted, tired of not being believed, and tired of being accused of things they didn't do. Or expecting and being so afraid someone's going to be angry at you that you behave in such a way toward them that they then become angry when initially they were not. This is related to something called projective identification, which is the process by which people not only project their fears, insecurities, and negative feelings onto others, they actually create them. Other examples of this could be someone hating themselves and expecting and fearing that others will hate them too, so they end up behaving in ways that cause people to hate them. Or someone who expects and fears being mistreated, so they act in ways that are designed to induce other people to do things that they then interpret as mistreatment, such as provoking other people until they lash out. So what does all of this mean? It means expectation plus fear is extremely powerful. It can create very distorted perception, can even cause things to happen. And this is in people who are not struggling with the same deficits as pathologically narcissistic people. For those who do have these deficits, the impact of expectation plus fear is magnified significantly. A narcissist's inability to process emotion and information accurately in the first place means they are even more susceptible to these distorted perceptions and seeing or even creating things that are not there. This can lead to a heightened sense of paranoia and a hypersensitivity to perceived slights, making interactions with them toxic, stressful, and absolutely fraught with misunderstandings, which are then impossible to resolve because this person does not trust or believe anything anybody says, and they can't tolerate being wrong on top of that. And this checks out. Narcissists expect the absolute worst to happen, and then they won't believe that it didn't. They are essentially attempting to force other people to act out the narcissist's fears, carry the narcissist's own negative feelings toward themselves, so the narcissist does not have to do that. Understanding this helps to demystify narcissists and put their behavior in a better perspective. This is especially helpful in situations where they are twisting the narrative or the events on purpose. Because yes, they do this out of ignorance, simply because that's the limited way in which they function, they also do it strategically. When you are a prisoner of needing to control what other people see and how they think of you, narrative control is extremely important. How can you control these things if you don't control the narrative? Things will be twisted strategically to fit into whatever the narcissist narrative is. This usually has to do with whatever idealized image of themselves that they are perpetrating. Very often, this is of themselves as a victim of some kind, but it can be anything. This idealized image, this false self, is the star of the show, and narcissists make the movie around the star. After all, if the star of the movie is a tough gunslinger, you don't make the movie about that guy being a circus clown. The backdrop has to reinforce, support, and help create the image. Otherwise, the movie, the illusion, doesn't work. It's not believable. Most importantly, it's not believable to the narcissist. So when something happens where they can't sincerely believe themselves to be their idealized false self, they will twist things until the things fit into that. People sometimes ask, how can they tell the difference between when this is being done on purpose and when it's being done out of ignorance? But the reality is that it doesn't matter. If someone thinks that there's some significant difference here, that's just what they think. The reality is that there's not. It isn't any safer or less dangerous to deal with someone who is constantly hurting you out of ignorance than if they're doing it strategically. It might make you feel better to know that, but it affects nothing in reality at all. In point of fact, if they are doing it out of ignorance, that's arguably more dangerous, not less. People get very caught up in trying to figure out which one is happening when and all this, but in reality, this is actually a complete waste of time because it really has no bearing on anything at all in practical application. None. If you look at this situation objectively, you will see that. It doesn't matter. It is a favorite fantasy of people that if someone's hurting them out of ignorance or otherwise not completely maliciously, that person can somehow be educated out of their ignorance and therefore out of their behavior. But this is not that kind of ignorance. This is ignorance born of inability, not lack of information. This person does not have the ability to be educated out of their lack of empathy. Their behaviors are not the result of never being told that they're harming other people, for example. These things are the result of not being able to understand that or care about it. And the reason they can't do these things is because they don't have the capability. You are not the first person to try to make them understand, and you will likely not be the last. It is what it is. It's important to know, too, that none of this excuses the behavior of narcissists. It provides context for understanding what's happening and why. It demystifies and helps put in perspective very confusing behavior from very confusing people. It does not excuse this behavior. Whether it's malicious or whether it's not, nothing excuses it. This person is a grown adult, and they are capable of making choices that don't harm other people. If they choose not to do that, they are responsible for their behavior. If you are dealing with a narcissist and they're always twisting things, it really helps to remember what this behavior is actually about. It is a desperate attempt from a very limited person to make reality into something that they can actually deal with. It doesn't mean anything. It's nonsense. It's noise. The reality is, pathologically narcissistic people live in a fantasy world. They really do, in the most fundamental sense of that phrase. They twist things to fit into the fantasy, sometimes because they really think that's what happened, and sometimes because they need to make it appear that way for their own reasons. Either way, they cannot deal with life and reality as is. They don't have the ability to see it or the coping skills to deal with it if they could see it. The best they can do is pretend that it's not true. Pretend that it's something else. It is really, really important to understand how much of this is really happening here. This person does not inhabit the same reality that you do. They really do not. Their perception and interpretation of you, of life, of the world, of themselves, of everything is entirely different than yours. This is not an act in the sense that, oh, they're just pretending to see things differently. No, they really do. If things happen that don't fit into their worldview, these things are ignored or they are reinterpreted to fit. Even when they are intentionally and strategically, consciously twisting things, it's not really because of any true misrepresentation of facts or reality. It's because what's true is what people believe. That's it. This is hard for rational people grounded in reality to understand, but you're dealing with a person who is neither of those things. Facts and reality mean nothing to them. This is both much more complex and much simpler than most people realize. Your view of things is complicated by facts and reality and what really happened. Theirs isn't. Those things hold no sway over these personalities whatsoever. They are not considered important at all, as you have likely already found out. What's true is what people believe. That's why they have to control the narrative and what other people think of them. Whatever people believe about narcissists becomes true. And if it's negative, this stays true unless and until the narcissist can find or create some opposing counter-reflection. To put it very simply, it's like Tinkerbell. The belief of others brings narcissists to life and makes them real. This really cannot be overstated. It's not a metaphor. It's not hyperbole. It's the truth of the situation. And if you think about it, you will see that that's how it is. When someone lives in a fantasy, when they live in an alternate reality, belief in that alternate reality is literally the only thing that concretizes it in any way. It's the only driving force behind it. And sadly, narcissists not only live in a fantasy, they are one. And it is only belief in this that makes them real. I hope that clears a few things up for you. As always, I look forward to your comments, questions, and suggestions, so please keep those coming. I take appointments online, over the phone, via text, via messenger, via email, on Zoom and Skype for clients worldwide. So if you're interested in speaking with me one-on-one, you can visit littleshaman.org to do that. I teach workshops, clinics, seminars, and more throughout the year. So if you are interested in seeing what we are running this month, you can visit littleshaman.org to do that. I have several books out for publication, so if you are interested in picking up a copy, you can do that on littleshaman.org or on amazon.com. And if you are interested in joining our support group with access to exclusive content, weekly support meetings, and more, you can visit littleshaman.org to do that. You've been listening to the Meditations and More podcast here on thelittleshaman.com, brought to you by Translational Healing, shamanspiritcenter.com, and littleshaman.org. That's me, Little Shaman. May the Great Spirit bless you. Have a beautiful day.
If you've been struggling through dealing with or recovering from an unhealthy relationship with a narcissist or other toxic personality, the Little Shaman has a catalog of over 500 YouTube videos designed to support your journey from discovery to recovery. You can also find additional resources on the Little Shaman website, including tools, courses, workshops, a support group with weekly meetings, and one-on-one appointments with the Little Shaman that are open to clients worldwide. There's even an AI chatbot built and trained exclusively by the Little Shaman using her work that can answer questions 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. For more information, visit littleshaman.org. You can listen to The Little Shaman wherever you find your favorite podcasts.